Welcome into another edition of Sunday No Huddle. We're joined by Robert Rosenthal from IlliniBoard.com, and this was a game where the Illini were in it. They were up 14-0, and they just couldn't hang on.
Yeah, statistically in the first quarter, it was a continuation of the Nebraska game of, every statistical category they were ahead, and you got to thinking, wow, well, maybe they just turned a corner at Rutgers, and that's this team now. And then second and third quarter, it was back to Purdue and Minnesota. So it's a rough roller coaster to be on if you're an Illini fan, because you're thinking, okay, this is something, and 14-0 lead over Iowa, and this is really going somewhere. And then 35 unanswered points, and right back to where it started.
So I think there was an obvious shift in momentum in this game. Was there a specific point for you where you kind of saw that happen?
I think Iowa made some adjustments in the second quarter defensively because they were a little surprised by the things Illinois was doing. And, at that point, Brandon Peters was 8 for 8 passing. And then the next 7 passes were incomplete. So he started 8 for 8 and then went 0 for the next 7, and that was the turn. Then Iowa started teeing up on the run. They respected the pass a little less. They started to wear down the defense. The defense did have some injuries. 4 starters went out mid-game due to injuries, and so, once that started to mount, it was an avalanche at that point. Iowa's remembered that they were Iowa and started to impose their will.
And for Lovie Smith, and this being his senior class, these guys that he recruited, and kind of it being a symbolic day with senior day and all that, I mean, it's disappointing for this group to come out with that kind of performance.
Yes, it's not. The issue is not so much that they lost by 14, because they were supposed to lose by 14. The line was 14 or 13 and a half, and they lost by 14. It's the game that the odds makers expected. The issue is, with that senior class at home, year 5, you're 14-point underdogs at home. That's the problem, because you see what Indiana is doing this year. You see what other programs have done after a long, slow build. And many, including myself, were hoping to see that in Champaign this year, and it just hasn't happened. There was a really good game against Nebraska, but the consistency just hasn't been there to win games like this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are asking, why? What happened? What's going on? I mean, so many other teams in the league have, like you said, had that slow build. Just why hasn't it been there for Illinois?
It's difficult to figure out, because you do see glimpses of it. The first quarter is what many thought this season could be. When you see them capable of a quarter like that, or even the whole Nebraska game, when you see that's a possibility, when you see it can be done, you expect consistency. You hope to see that over 4 full quarters. And so for a switch to flip off mid-second quarter, and it's not back until very late in the game when they put Isaiah Williams in the game, that's hard to see. You just need consistency. You need that team all the time.
And I think it's a question of depth as well. I mean, when Caleb Griffin is returning punts, that's a huge question mark for the team.
Yes, there were 4 injuries on the defense, but when you have this many seniors and you're this far into your tenure, you would hope that the second string is right there to not fall off much, to come in and take over. Now, some positions like linebacker, they're really hurting with injuries, and it's they're turning to walk-ons at this point. But yeah, that's the issue, and the same on the offense. You're hoping that there was depth to cover any of these issues that you've been seeing, and it just hasn't been the case.
And where do you think they go from here? I mean, it's disappointing. They have the opportunity to turn things around, but at this point, is it just a lost cause?
You have 2 games here. Well, possibly. You have a Northwestern game, and then you have whatever the Big Ten is going to do with their Super Saturday or whatever they're calling it. Your opponent on that might be Michigan. Who knows what that week is going to be like? And so, you have an opportunity here with 2 more games to say, okay, Northwestern. We talked last week, right? We talked about my little checklist.
Yeah.
And if you remember, the next thing on that checklist was Purdue needs to lose to Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Purdue lost to Nebraska. So, and then Illinois has this lead in the first quarter, and my thinking is, okay, my checklist is already over because the Northwestern-Minnesota game got canceled, and that means it wasn't possible. But when Illinois had a lead in the first quarter, it was going to be, Illinois was that game from getting canceled away from Northwestern Illinois being for the Big Ten West title. That's what they could have put themselves in position with a win in this. That it's a crazy season. People are getting canceled. Wisconsin is already out of it somehow. Everything is there to, okay, let's be the one. Let's be the Indiana of the Big Ten West. Let's step up. Let's have this moment. And it just didn't happen. And that's what's disappointing is it's right there for the taking, and no one has proven to be the really great team of the Big Ten West. And when you have 33 seniors walk on senior day, you had this opportunity to be that team, and it just didn't happen.
If the Illini can't get a win these next 2 games, I mean, they want to end things on a high note, but if they can't do that, what does that mean for this program?
I mean, it's so hard to say because of what this season has been. It's easy for a coaching staff to point to all the players that missed the Minnesota and Purdue games, and there's all these what ifs and who knows, and there's also a really weird coaching carousel that is limited by financial constraints everywhere, so it's really hard to even say what it means or what it would mean. But I think you can say, after a 5-year rebuild with so many thoughts being pointed toward 2020 and the head coach himself talking about 2020 as the year when everything is fully there, if that season is 2-6, I don't think that's what anybody expected, and that's a rough way to end year 5 if that's what happens.
There's kind of the potential of maybe like getting this season as a do-over with the eligibility that players will have. Everyone's granted an extra year of eligibility, so maybe they get 2020 part 2 next season.
It's very possible. It's so hard to even say. The media calls this week of the players that were on. A lot of the media were asking the questions like, what's it like to walk on senior day and this and that. No one knows if this even is senior day for every single player. All 33 guys that were recognized on Saturday could possibly return next year for a second senior season, and then you could just say this is the do-over. But if this is 2-6, it feels like the do-over would be something like 4-8 when you add a non-conference schedule, and that's just not going to be good enough for Josh Whitman and for what this program's trying to be. So it's a really difficult thing to look at and to evaluate, given there's constraints on finances and everything else. What happens, it's hard to say until we get to the end of this.
It's so tough. And maybe a normal year, this would have been the end of Lovie Smith's tenure, but I'm kind of thinking like, okay, there's so many dicey things that could go into this. I mean, his coaching staff, as far as recruiting, will players leave? Will they transfer? And then do you just wipe a clean slate and not be able to build off anything that there was, these past 5 years?
Yeah, I think the question is mostly what can be done. Okay, so say they decided this is the end, and say they go 2-6, and Josh Whitman decides that's not good enough, and that's not what we are paying this much money for, and this and that. The question is then, even if there's a budget for any replacement, and what could even get approved by the board when there's such a financial shortfall in the athletics department. It's just there's so many unknowns that you can't really say what should or shouldn't or could or couldn't be done, because you don't know what financial constraints would be there. So it's this large unknown that we're going to be walking into.
And I want to go back to, the momentum shift in the game. I know they threw Isaiah Williams in there for a little bit. Do you think he should have gone in a little bit earlier?
I was surprised to not see him go in for maybe 2 or 3 plays, a change of pace. You could see, in fact, if you remember, Iowa took a timeout about 4 plays into that series to say, wait a second, this is a totally different offense. We need to talk to our guys. We need to say, this is different. They're going to run this kind of stuff. I'm surprised they didn't use that. They didn't play that card earlier in the because that's an advantage you have with someone like Isaiah Williams of you toss him in there. I mean, Iowa was doing it with a wildcat package, snapping it directly to their running back. And at the time, I think a lot of Illinois fans were thinking, I wonder, why is Illinois not playing the same card and throwing a curveball and seeing what? It was very surprising to see it not be until, hey, we need a spark from a different guy, and we're putting him in mid-4th quarter.
I was also surprised. I was expecting this to be kind of a takeaway battle, but for there to be no turnovers, that surprised me.
Very, very surprising. Everybody was talking about, after how these teams have won games this year, everybody was talking about that would it be, and not a single one. So, and it also shows that the Illinois defense, when not getting those turnovers, eventually these drives end up in the end zone, not with punts, and that's the issue.
And this is such a hard question to ask, but like, what do they do now? I mean, what do they need to do against Northwestern? Because at this point, it feels like people are checked out. Hope is gone. You know, can they do this? Can they pull out 2 wins and I guess salvage the season in some type of way?
Yes. I mean, I'll say it this way. It's a great opportunity for a coach in this circumstance. You have a team that's going to win, that has already won the Big Ten West, but they're not dominant. They just lost to a bad Michigan State team. Mm-hmm. They haven't blown anyone out. They just have a solid defense and a good enough offense. That's a team that you need to go in and say, look, we're not as bad as our 2-4 record shows, and prove it. And then you need to go into the next game and prove it again. So they have a great opportunity against a ranked team at their place, but it's your rival, to show we haven't given up. This is still a season. We still see possibilities here, and go get it. So it's a good opportunity to show, no, we haven't lost this team. We're going to go out and we're going to get this one.
All right, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. You can hear more on our website, WCIA.com, and we'll see how next week pans out.
You got it. Thanks.